chapter from grade 7th English. The chapter that we were reading was the invention of what? The invention of Vita-Wonk. Okay, we were learning the chapter, the invention of Vita-Wonk. So, in the first part of the video, first part of the chapter, I have explained you that what is the background of the chapter, what are the main characters of the chapter, and we have seen that what is there in the chapter. So, we have started our chapter and we are halfway on our chapter. So, what were the things? There is a word here, Vita. I have explained you what does it means. I have related it with Vita. So, I think now you all are aware with what Vita is. Vita is formed from the word white, which is used for any kind of a drink. Okay, so Vita-Wonk. Why Wonk? Because it is it is the invention of Mr. Willy Wonka. So it is called Vita-Wonk. So we were reading in the chapter that there is one scientist, kind of a inventor, whose name is Willy Wonka, who has invented this Vita-Wonk. And what does this Vita-Wonk do? It makes you younger. Whenever you will drink this Vita-Wonk, you will become very young. Whatever your age is, your age will be deducted. So this was an invention of Mr. Willy Wonka, but there was a very strange thing about this, that the Vita, the white, became very strong. What happened? It became very strong. So because it was very strong, the people who had it became too young. They were on the verge of extinction. How? Suppose my age is 12, I have had this Vita-Wonk, and now my age is minus 14. So still I have 2 years to take birth. So this was the problem with this drink. So Mr. Willy Wonka had one companion with him, a small boy whose name was Charlie. So Charlie went to Mr. Wonka and saw this invention, and Mr. Wonka discussed with him that he wants to make his mistake right. He wants to correct his mistake. So what Mr. Wonka decided, that he will make an antidote. Okay, what is an antidote? Something that reduces the effect of drink, maybe any medicine. So he decided to make another drink which will make people old. So the one who has diminished, who has still a few years to be born, he will come back to his life. So what is now the purpose of Mr. Wonka? To make another white through which people will grow old. So this is the story that we have come across, and we have seen that there are a number of things that Mr. Wonka had collected. There are several things that are the ingredients of this new white which makes people old. So we will see that whether Mr. Wonka had any success while making this drink or not. So without much ado, let's start reading of our chapter. I am Aman from DPS Alwani Ramachor, and you're watching PTO classes. So let's start reading of the part 2 of the chapter. So before starting to read the chapter, the next part of the chapter, I would like to remind you that where were we before this? Okay, so Charlie was inside the laboratory, we can say laboratory of Mr. Willy Wonka, and there Mr. Wonka was telling Charlie that he has a number of ingredients that he has collected from all over the world which can make people grow old and which will act as an antidote to what he has made. Okay, so let's now see that what are these ingredients. We can see the ingredients now. Okay, so there was a thing that Mr. Wonka told Charlie that is very much needed in order to make the recipe. Okay, recipe, you all know the steps of making a dish, especially while you are cooking. So here also he was making a white, which is a drink. So there are a number of ingredients which are required for making this drink. So the things that he needed, the first ingredient for the recipe was a pint of sap from a 4,000-year-old bristlecone pine. Okay, so this thing was told by Mr. Wonka to Charlie that there are number of trees which are very old, but the bristlecone pine tree is the oldest amongst all. So this grows in Nevada, a place in USA, and that too in Nevada, mountain range is there which is known as the Wheeler Peak. Name of the mountain is Wheeler Peak. So it grows there in Nevada in USA, and this bristlecone pine is almost 4,000 year old. So from that, a pint, that means a small amount of that trees, what we can say, like we make the chutney and other things, they can take that amount and they can drop it in the recipe. The second thing that was collected by Mr. Wonka for making people old through the white, the second thing was the toenail of the toenail from a 168-year-old Russian farmer. Okay, so this is a very fictitious thing. Fictitious means not real, unreal. Fiction, you know what fiction is? Fiction is when we write stories when the stories are not real. They are fictitious. They are all but fiction. Okay, so they are not real. So there the second ingredient is the toenail from a 168-year-old Russian farmer called Petrovich Gregorovich. Okay, so the toenail from the 168-year-old farmer, Russian farmer Petrovich Gregorovich. Okay, so the third ingredient that was required to make the drink was an egg laid by a 200-year-old tortoise. Okay, so the third thing was an egg that is laid by a 2-year-old. Sorry, I am saying 2 year, not 2 year, 200-year-old tortoise belonging to the king of Tonga. So the king Tonga had the 200-year-old tortoise whose egg is also used in the recipe. So this also sounds very fictitious. This is not real. Any king Tonga would have been there. So these are all just cooked up stories. Okay, the story is just a fiction one, the thoughts of a writer, and it is not a true story. So the fourth thing was the tale of a 51-year-old horse in Arabia. So the fourth thing, the tale of a 51-year-old horse in Arabia. I am again telling you all these things because it is very important. You have to learn all the things. You have to learn by heart all the ingredients that were required to make the recipe. So it can come and it surely will come in your exams. So you have to learn all these ingredients. So the fourth thing was the tale of a 51-year-old horse in Arabia, and the fifth thing was the whiskers. Okay, the whiskers of a 36-year-old cat called Crumpets. Okay, the whiskers. You have seen a cat, her whiskers, मूछों में जो बाल होते हैं, all that. So the whiskers from a 36-year-old cat called Crumpets. And from that very same cat, an old flea. Okay, what is a flea? Flea is that that germ, the small insect, okay, pissu we can say in Hindi, you can understand it better that way. An old flea which had lived on crumpets for 36 years, okay, right from the birth of that cat, it is there. And the next thing that was required was the tail of a 207-year-old giant rat from Tibet. We call in Hindi Tibet, but in English we pronounce Tibet. Okay, Tibet, from Tibet it is there, and a 207-year-old giant rat, the tail of that rat. So it is all. It is also not real. Next thing, the black teeth of a 97-year-old grimalkin, okay, grimalkin, living in a cave on Mount Popocatépetl. Okay, so the black teeth of that 97-year-old giant of a grimalkin living in a cave on Mount Popocatépetl. Next thing that was required was the knuckle bones of a 700-year-old catalu from Peru. So all these things are not real. Maybe the bristlecone pine, you can understand, you can think that it can be true, it can be real thing, but other than that, all these things are just imaginary, okay, like fairy tale. So all these are the things that were needed to make the recipe. So these were the things that are needed to make the recipe, and now we will move ahead that what happened, and we will see that how our story goes. So the ingredients were told by Mr. Willy Wonka to Charlie, and now we will see that what happened next. Okay, so after this, Charlie, Mr. Wonka said, "All over the world, Charlie," Mr. Wonka went on, "I tracked down every old and ancient animals and took an important little bit of something from each one of them." So Mr. Wonka told Charlie that I went all over the world to collect the ingredients that are mentioned, and I met different kind of species of animals and other things and other creatures, and I took an important little bit of something from each one of them. Like from rat he took the tail, from cat he took the whiskers, from tortoise he took the egg. So from each one of them Mr. Wonka took a part of them, and more things he is suggesting here: a hair on an eyebrow, or sometimes it was no more than an ounce or two of the jam scraped between its toes while it was sleeping. Okay, so he's saying that he's just mentioning that sometimes I used to take out the hair from some creature's eyebrow, or jam that was there on the toe of that creature. So he's saying that anything that is a part of that creature, an old creature, because the drink is supposed to make people old, so creatures are also the oldest creatures on earth. So he collected that. I tracked down the whistle pig, the bobolink, the scroc, the polyfrog, the giant curlicue, the stinging slug, and the venomous squircle. So all the names here mentioned are all are all imaginary. So Mr. Wonka has been telling Charlie about the creatures, and all the creatures are imaginary, like we see in fairy tales. Okay, so fiction, I was talking about fiction. What is fiction? Like Cinderella, the story of Cinderella, or the story of Aladdin, all that are nothing but fiction, imaginary. Those are not real. So same way, the things mentioned here, the names of the animals mentioned here, are also imaginary. So, but there's no time to tell you about them all now, Charlie. So Mr. Wonka is saying that I don't have enough time to tell you about all the animals or creatures I have met who are very old. There's no time for all that now. Let me just quickly say that in the end, after lots of boiling and bubbling and mixing and testing, so boiling, bubbling, testing is used as an expression to show that Mr. Wonka was cooking something. Okay, he was cooking something. So when you cook something, a boil comes, bubbles are created, you mix the vegetables, you mix the ingredients. So he is saying to Charlie that I don't have enough time to talk about all the things that I have collected, but I can say that quickly I can say that after lots of boiling, bubbling and mixing, means after lot of cooking and testing, in my inventing room I produced one tiny cupful of oily black liquid. Okay, so he said that I don't have to mention all the things that were there, but I can say that after lot of cooking in my inventing room, in my lab, I produced a tiny cupful, a small cup of oily black liquid. Okay, oily here means greasy, oily chipchipa liquid he made, and gave 4 drops of it to a brave 20-year-old Oompa Loompa volunteer. Okay, Oompa Loompa. Who is Oompa Loompa? If you have seen the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, then you would know about it. And if you have not seen Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, ask your parents to download the movie from somewhere or get the movie from somewhere. Or if the school would have been running, I would have shown you the movie myself. Someday, if the school will be running, I will talk to sir and we will see the movie together. The movie is very nice for kids, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Okay, so in that movie there are some creatures, Oompa Loompas. Have you seen a dwarf, Bonnet, we call in Hindi, like in Cinderella's story, or no, sorry, I am saying Cinderella, Snow White's story, there was 7 dwarfs. Okay, the people who are of small height. So Oompa Loompas are such creatures who are dwarfs, and they have a very short height. They live on an island. So it is all created by Willy Wonka, by our writer, to be more exact. So Oompa Loompas are just a piece of our writer's thoughts, that some small imaginary creatures are there, people are there who live on an island and they work for Mr. Willy Wonka. So he said that I produced a tiny cup of that oily liquid and I gave it to Oompa Loompa, one of the Oompa Loompa, a brave 20-year-old Oompa Loompa, a small creature, and to see that what will happen if someone drinks that liquid. So what did happen, Charlie asked. So Charlie wanted to know that what happened when the Oompa Loompa, the small creature, the small man, drank that liquid, that potion. So what would have happened? What are your thoughts? It was fantastic, cried Mr. Wonka. So Mr. Wonka said it was very great. Oompa Loompa drank that, and the moment he swallowed it, swallowed matlab nigalna, the moment he swallowed it, he began wrinkles. You have seen the marks that you have on your face when you grow old, the wrinkles. So as soon as he drank the drink, the Oompa Loompa, he began wrinkling and shriveling up all over, and his hair started dropping off. So he started to shake, his body started shaking, and his body, his face rather, and his hands, his had the wrinkles all over his body, and his hair started to fall. So all these are signs of growing old. So Oompa Loompa became old all of a sudden. So he was 20-year-old brave Oompa Loompa, and all of a sudden his body had wrinkles, his face had wrinkles, his body started to shiver, his hair started to fall down, and his teeth started falling out. Okay, so what happens when you grow old? Your hair fall down, your teeth fall down, you have wrinkles, you become weak, So all the signs of aging, of growing old, were visible on the Oompa Loompa. Before I knew it, he had suddenly become an old fellow of 75. So, see, in the beginning, Mr. Wonka mentioned that Oompa Loompa was 20 years of age, a brave Oompa Loompa, and when he drank that potion, that oily liquid, what happened? Oompa Loompa became old, he had wrinkles, his body became weak, he was shivering, his teeth fall down, his hair fell down, and what happened? Suddenly he became a man, an Oompa Loompa of the age of 75. From 20 he became 75. So uh, he became 25 years older than his age. Sorry, not 25, 55 years older than his actual age. And thus, my dear Charlie, was Vita-Wonk invented. So the drink that Mr. Wonka made now was this drink, which makes people old. Earlier he had made a drink which used to make people young, but it was not successful as people started become the people started becoming younger than their age of the age that were there. They became so young because of this strong drink that they diminished. So now to uh, to counter the effect of that drink, Mr. Wonka created this Vita-Wonk, and he tested it on Oompa Loompa, who was 20 years of age, and Oompa Loompa became 75 years old after drinking that white. So this all happened, and Mr. Wonka told Charlie this thing, that I made Oompa Loompa old, so I can now make those who have diminished because of the that earlier potion, I can get them back to their life. Okay, so this was the story. I hope that you have liked the story and enjoyed the story. It is a very fine story. You have seen that how very interestingly writer has used the ingredients. A very funny elements are also there. So I hope that the chapter was very nice, and I wish to get a good response from your end when I will take a test of this chapter. So this story was written by Roald Dahl. Okay, Roald Dahl, and it is taken from Charlie the Great Glass Elevator. So this small story is a part of a big story that is Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator. So here our story concludes, and I hope that you have understood the story, and I hope that you have enjoyed the story. So here our chapter concludes. I hope that you have enjoyed the chapter. I hope that you have understood the chapter. The story was very interesting. We have seen that how an invention was made from Mr. Willy Wonka, and how it went wrong, and how he tried to correct his mistake. So from the chapter we can learn that no matter what or how big our mistake is, we can always correct our errors. It's just that we need to accept our mistakes. Okay, so I hope that you have understood the chapter and you will do the question answers. Although I am sending you the answers of the question, but try to write your own answers in your own language so that you will understand the chapter better. Okay, so you are watching video classes. I am Aman from DPS Haldwani Lamachor. Stay connected and watch the future videos. Watch all the videos properly so that you can understand the concepts. So for now it is this much only. We will meet again in the next